Rattling.
Potato chips.
Oh, all right. Are you through?
Yes, I am.
Thank you. The lake effect snow machine is turned on tonight, and some places are going to get a couple of feet before it's all said and done sometime on Wednesday. In the meantime, it's cold up and down the eastern seaboard, and that includes me here in North Georgia, where it did not get out of the 30s today. So we will tell you about how long this cold shot's going to last. Actually, for this time of year, it's pretty impressive. And we'll take a look at the rest of the week ahead and peek at the weekend, and maybe you'll do a little long range. All tonight on the Joe and Joe Weather Show, which is brought to you by Tempest by Weatherflow. Get the revolutionary Tempest weather system, and you too could have. What could they have, Joe? Actually, wait. What? They get the revolutionary Tempest weather system, and they will be joining.
They will be joining what?
The fastest growing observing weather network. Yes.
You're gonna have to put it up on the monitor for me to say this. Get the revolutionary Tempest weather system. Join the fastest growing observing network on the planet. And if you use the code I want a weather station, you will get 10% off any item that you purchase from Tempest. And if you're thinking about getting a wonderful weather station for some young individual out there as a Christmas or Hanukkah present, then the best place to go to is Tempest. Again, the fastest growing weather observing network on this wonderful planet that we all live on, planet Earth.
The link is pinned to the top of the chat board, by the way, and it's also on the descriptor to this video. So then use the coupon code I want a weather station. So,
Jay Stewart couldn't have done better.
Yes. Ethel May, you were never prettier.
Yes.
Well, I won't argue with that. I got two webcams up, and it's not really showing. Neither one is really showing very much, but this is downtown Watertown, Joe. On this first camera shot, the roads are wet, so they've had some snow there. But the roads are wet at the moment. You can see all the traffic that's scurrying home from a day's work. And then we also have I have another webcam here. This is the Armory cam in Syracuse, and of course, I mean, you have to look really close. There are a few flakes falling here. The streets are wet. I checked the temperature at Syracuse was 31. But they haven't had anything with regards to real intensity so far. Of course, all the places where it's snowing very hard, Joe, at this time, okay, their webcams only provide still shots, and it's nighttime, and it's dark, so you can't really see anything. So I just kind of took the two that were the most. I'm really impressed by downtown Watertown. That's pretty cool, don't you think?
Well, Watertown is immediately to the lee of Lake Ontario. Somebody just asked, where is Watertown? It's in upstate New York. And the one thing I'm noticing about this shot that you just had with Syracuse are the incredible bright street lights that they have.
Yes.
I don't know, Main Street or whatever. Now I'm supposed to, one of the places I made a hotel reservation for the solar eclipse next April is Syracuse, New York, because they're in the totality path. But I got to tell you something. If that's what's going to happen during totality, if those lights come on, don't see me anywhere near Syracuse during the total phase of the eclipse.
Well, not where. Well, I mean, is your hotel room in the downtown?
I'm not sure where it is. Syracuse is not exactly one of the biggest cities. Actually, I'm not planning to be in Syracuse proper because they're near the edge of totality. But what probably will be done if we are there is to get in the car and travel up along I-81. And not quite to Watertown, I might add.
No, but you go to Pulaski.
Could go to Pulaski too,
or Pulaski, depending on who you talk to.
I've got reservations though in Syracuse. I'm sure that if I went to Watertown or Pulaski and tried to get a a hotel reservation, they would probably try to rip me off. Joe, this is the absolute truth. Places in and near the totality path for a hotel room on or about the day of the eclipse, which is April the 8th, you probably will be spending anywhere from $500 to upwards to, in some cases, $1,000 a night. I mean, you talk about capitalism and you talk about taking advantages of a good thing. That's what the hotels are doing. I fortunately made my reservations more than a year ahead of schedule. So this is before any of the people in places like Syracuse or, Plattsburgh knew that there was a total eclipse coming.
Well, wait till they all find out that Taylor Swift is going to be in Syracuse for the total eclipse. She does. In case anybody doesn't realize this, she watches the Joe and Joe Weather Show, which is on Sunday through Thursday at 7:35 p.m. And if there's a storm, we'll pop on a Friday or a Saturday. And of course, Taylor Swift is among the first to know about this. Just a reminder, everybody. So after tomorrow, we will be off until next Sunday. Well, that's the plan anyway. We will be off till next Sunday. So no show Wednesday, no show Thursday this week, and no show Friday and Saturday. And we'll be back on Sunday. So a nice little late November lake effect event that's going to be going on. I know you're going to have the radars in just a second, but I figured I'd just start off with what the Weather Service is going for with respect to snow accumulations. And they're better than you or I. We don't we don't have forecast experience in lake effect country, but they usually do a pretty good job here. The Weather Service offices that handle western and northern New York, so that would be Binghamton and Buffalo. And then northwest Pennsylvania. I think Buffalo does Erie County in Pennsylvania. And then northeast Ohio. All of these places are under lake effect snow warnings. And we've got the snow accumulation forecast because a lot of this is going to be still lingering on into Wednesday. So they got a ways to go yet. And we're seeing a swath of 12 to 18 inches from just east of Cleveland, northeastward through much of northwest PA and southwestern New York. Then the amounts sort of tail off a bit. They're only forecasting a couple of inches in Buffalo out of this. And then the other part is the winds that are coming off of Lake Ontario, so that's bullish for snowfall in northern New York, north central New York. So that's Watertown, Pulaski, Redfield, all those places up there. They get clobbered. And that yellowish area, almost a little dab of white in there too. That's 32 inches plus up there, just east of I-81 in Pulaski. So I say this every year. One of these years, I'm gonna get in the truck and go up there. I just got new tires put on today, so. But one of these years, I'm gonna go up there, Joe, during a lake effect snow event and just sort of park a lawn chair outside and watch the snow come in, snow bands.
I don't know if you'd park a lawn chair. What I would do is I'd find a hotel with a nice big window.
With a second floor.
And I'd park the lawn chair behind the window. Because I think if you're even just a few yards away from the hotel, it might be dangerous. You might not be able to find the hotel. In the worst case scenario.
Well, you definitely. I will tell you from my last. It's been a few years since I've been up I-81 north of Syracuse to Pulaski. There are a couple of chain hotels, but a lot of the hotels that are up there are because that's a fishing town, and all the towns around there are fishing towns. So you're going to find these, local hotels, motels, hotels. Some of them are nice, some of them not so nice, and a lot of them don't really open until you get to the fishing season, which for them is the summer, certainly late summer and fall when it's salmon season. So I think they probably have heard that the eclipse is coming there. So I'm not sure whether you'd get a break or not.
Well, it's I know that Buffalo is trying to use it. The Chamber of Commerce of Buffalo is trying to use it to convince people to come to visit Buffalo. I mean, I don't know how many things are in Buffalo that would want you to go to Buffalo, but certainly having a total eclipse of the sun is something. So it'll be a big story up there, and let's hope that the weather turns out to be pretty nice for that particular day. But still too far in advance to make a judgment call on that. So let's go to the first radar.
Knock yourself out.
And for that, let me just go here.
You do that. I'm going to get a glass of water.
Share my screen. And you can get your glass of water.
I need to get a glass of water. My room's on fire. Oh, I'll harm you. All right, go for it. I'll be right back.
Okay. Well, this is the National Weather Service radar over in Binghamton, and as you can see, there is a swath of lake effect snow that has made it all the way across from Lake Erie all the way across to areas just to the north of Binghamton. Let's see, Syracuse is right here where my cursor is, and I-81 goes up like that. So if you're anywhere on I-81 right now heading northbound, you're heading right into bands of moderate to possibly even heavy snow. And as Joe pointed out, in some places like Pulaski, they may pick up in excess of 30 inches of snow out of this. And notice, if you will, that the bands of snow are moving basically from west to east. But down here where we happen to be, here in the New York metropolitan area, nothing as of this moment. But it is not out of the question that tomorrow, with winds coming out of a northwest direction, gusting to over 30 miles an hour in the afternoon, that a few of these snow showers might actually break off and make it as far south as our area here in the tri-state region. So maybe tomorrow afternoon, we just might see a couple of snow showers or maybe a flurry or two, at least the first signs of any snow activity for this particular season. Now, let's, this is a little bit of a different radar that I normally go to. Let me just see if I go straight north of Binghamton. Okay, so this is the view.
Pretty solid band. There's a really nice looking, couple of nice bands in there.
Well, here's Watertown right here, and it looks like they're right in the thick of things. I'm not exactly sure what this is. I'm not sure if it's well, here's Oneonta, and here is Utica, where Uncle Leo lives, and Syracuse is here. So I guess this is the Syracuse radar, and you can see again these snow bands that are really quite significant, with again moderate to possibly even heavy embedded snowfall. Now, I can't go any further north than this. Let's go to the southeast and see where we end up. Well, here, this is Albany, and they haven't reached, the snow activity has not reached the Albany area, but just to the west, over in Cobleskill, for example, or again in Oneonta, they are getting snow. And again, there could be some significant snowfall. And I'm not talking about, in terms of feet for Oneonta, but they could pick up, the way it looks right now on the radar, at least a few inches of the white stuff. But again, as you go past Oneonta and get to within striking distance of Albany, here are the Catskill Mountains, and a lot of this activity, when it goes down slope of the mountains, dries out. But still, it's possible that one or two areas might see some localized snow activity during the day tomorrow from all of this. Let's go back further to the west. Yeah, oh, look at this, Joe. This is right along the lee of, well, here's Lake Ontario, and here's Lake Erie. And let me see here. This is Dunkirk, New York. Here's Jamestown, where Lucille Ball at one time lived and was a native there. Erie, Pennsylvania is here. So again, if you're in this area, right along the lee of Lake Erie, you're getting some significant snowfall. Now, Joe mentioned that Buffalo is only in line for about an inch or two, and looks like Buffalo right now is right on the northern edge, right on the northern fringe of this activity. I would suppose that the winds would have to come more around from the southwest to really hit Buffalo hard with some really hefty snows. But again, if you're in Buffalo and if you're decided that you're going to travel to the south, you're going to run right into this band of rather heavy snow. So whereas Buffalo may only pick up an inch or two,
Right.
places just a stone's throw to the south, probably you can multiply that inch or two by a factor of 10 and probably get a much larger snow accumulation.
Yeah, but Buffalo, but the best wind for Buffalo is a west-southwest wind because that runs the entire length of Lake Erie from one end to the other.
Yeah.
And for northwest and for north central New York, you get that west wind off Lake Ontario, and that, again, that's the same idea. The whole fetch is all the way across Lake Ontario. Syracuse, I think Syracuse does better with a northwest wind, which will probably be the case after the upper trough goes by tomorrow. The wind will go more northwest, and they'll get most of their snow probably tomorrow night into early Wednesday morning. And I think Rochester's in one of these funny spots. It's got to be like almost a northwest or northwest wind for Rochester to do well.
Right. And I used to do Rochester weather. So yeah, that was a very tricky. Sodus Bay and the area around Rochester, Irondequoit. It was always I found and I did Buffalo weather too in my radio days, but I found Rochester to be more difficult because again, unlike Buffalo, where as you said, Joe, if you get a straight southwest wind, it's more or less right along the entire width or breadth of Lake Erie, and it's easy when you see that wind blowing over Lake Erie and Buffalo's right at the end of the lake, you know pretty much what they're going to get. But Rochester's kind of in a weird spot relative to Lake Ontario. Again, you'd probably have to see more of a north or northwest wind to get a broad area of moisture coming in from around the lake and into the area around Rochester. But you can see again, Watertown on that west wind right across Lake Ontario is right in the thick of things here. And Syracuse here. And again, it kind of peters out somewhere around Cobleskill, which is just abreast to the west of Albany. And
did you do? Go ahead. Yeah. I was going to say, did you do Cleveland?
We can do Cleveland. We can go that way. If let me see. If I go this way, what does that give me? Well, yeah. Well, here's Cleveland right here. Let me just see if I can get it close. And yeah, so here's Cleveland, and they have snow shower and flare. Although it doesn't look quite as intense. It looks like the most intense activity is just to their north, out over Lake Erie. But they're getting some snow in Cleveland as well. And let's see. Here is Lower Peninsula of Michigan. Here's Detroit. If we move further to the west, we can see that the Lower Peninsula. Now here's a band that's coming off of Lake Michigan. And for places like just to the north of Kalamazoo, there's some pretty hefty snows that are probably going on. Chicago, too, is into lake effect. But for Chicago, they would have to get a wind more from the north and northeast in order to receive a hefty quantity of snow, although they are probably seeing some snow shower and flurry activity from this system. It's not anywhere near what places that are in the direct line of these ribbons of or bands of heavy snow coming in off of the lakes are seeing the lee side of the lakes. So anyway, that's how it looks, Joe. So folks are getting their first real snowfall of the season in places in and around the Great Lakes tonight. And again, we might see in the New York area a couple of snow showers or flurries if they make it as far south and east tomorrow on that rather gusty that rather gusty northwest wind that we're anticipating during the day tomorrow.
Yes. All right. In the meantime, I'm just trying to get something in my system here to show a little bit later on. Floodweather sent us the EPO charts, so we're going to take a look at those when we get to the long range. So
Kenny Zilla hit the chat board, the super chat tonight. Thank you very much for that, Ken.
Yes, and I'm back to two monitors tonight, Joe, so I can see what's going on. I moved back into the studio / bedroom that I usually broadcast from, and JJ's asleep on the bed, which is his usual place when we're on the air. So On that note, let's take a look at what's happening on the satellite loop. By the way, we have a new person on the chat board. I noticed Mr. Storm is on the chat board tonight, and that's
Mr.
Mr.
Storm.
Storm. So thank you for joining the conversation here. So there's our satellite loop. And just to reference what's going on with the lake effect, if you look closely, you can kind of see there's a bit of a jet streak here. I'm going to try to draw it in, just right in here. There's a bit of a jet streak that's going right over Lake Erie and Lake Ontario, which is facilitating all of this. And of course, we have this rather deep upper trough that's going to be moving eastward. I think you're probably going to get the heavier snow kick in as that upper trough gets close tomorrow morning and then swings eastward through upstate New York. That's when the the core of the cold air comes in. And by the way, this cold air mass goes all the way down into Florida. Joe, I did not get out of the 30s today here in North Georgia, and right now it's 29 at 7:57, and there was a wind today too. So that we had some sun, but there was a wind, and it made it a little bit. I would say this was because it's been cold here in the mornings for on and off for quite a while. You started back in October, but this is I think I would qualify this as the first day where the day side was pretty cold, and that's going to lead to another cold day tomorrow because I think tomorrow's going to be another day where it struggles to get above the 40-degree mark or into the low 40s. There's some moisture down in Texas coming up from Mexico into the western Gulf. Still, we don't have any big storms. And by the way, speaking of which, that coastal low last night really got going. They had gusts of 50 miles an hour over parts of Long Island and particularly over southeastern New England. It's just about every station in Rhode Island reported wind gusts over 50 miles an hour last night.
Wow.
Plus the rain. Some places got a couple of inches.
Yeah, the rain where I was, excuse me, the rain where I was really didn't get going until after 10 o'clock. By midnight, we had about 3/4 of an inch. It was still coming down fairly hard after the witching hour of midnight. So, so that area of wet weather, pretty significant. And again, yeah, you're right, Joe. It was rather windy. Now, tomorrow, the winds are going to be gusting to around 30 or 35 miles an hour in the afternoon. And we're expecting a sunny to partly cloudy sky. And again, don't be surprised if, for a few moments you look out the window and you see some snow falling. Again, there may be a snow flurry or a renegade snow shower in your area tomorrow. And with those winds, it will indeed feel all the colder.
Yeah, I have the wide shot here so you can see all the local radars that Joe took you on, and now you can sort of see the bigger picture with the bands of snow across southern Michigan, also in northern Michigan. What's in Ohio, you're just starting to see a heavier, a steadier band generate in Lake Erie itself. Hasn't come ashore yet. They're probably going to come ashore near or just east of Cleveland. And then you do see the more active bands in southwestern New York, particularly the one just south of Buffalo and Niagara in Dunkirk, in that dark green area. I imagine that's probably moderate snow that's falling there, and also in north central New York. And again, we're early in the game here because the bulk of this is going to come when that upper trough gets closer. There's some light shower activity breaking out over parts of Texas. A lot of this is aloft. That is, it's not even reaching the ground. Radars are quiet from the pretty much along the coastal plain from Maine all the way down to Florida. And the western part of the United States there's not a thing, not a raindrop, not a flake, not an ice pellet. Nothing. WPC in the next 5 days. So this takes us to Saturday evening. We've got a system potentially for later Friday into early Saturday coming into the Northeast, and it's basically 1/4 of an inch, not much. We have maybe a system behind that for early next week, and the models are picking up on moisture in the Gulf states, and WPC has got 1.5 to 2.5 to 3 inches in the lower Mississippi Valley down to the Louisiana coast, which is great news because this whole area is under exceptional drought and needs some. They've been getting sort of these little shots of relief the last couple of weeks with rain, but they're going to need a whole lot more. So this is certainly beneficial to them, and also into Georgia where we've got some extreme drought conditions in northwest Georgia and moderate to severe drought in northeast Georgia up into the western Carolinas. The amounts tail off in the mid-Atlantic states, only about a tenth to like maybe a tenth or less, or at most 2/10 of an inch of rain possible. Moisture on the order of a quarter to a half in the southwest, and then up the Wasatch and then into the northern Rockies, and some heavier rains of up to a few inches over the next 5 days in the Pacific Northwest. Snow wise, I went right off the bat, didn't waste any time. Joe, I put this is the probability for at least 12. And you see that salmon area, that's Pulaski, or Pulaski, Watertown, those areas, or nearby, where the probability is 80% or higher for at least 12. In southwestern New York, it's 50% or higher for at least 12. So this is a fairly solid lake effect snow event, but it's not a crazy one like we've seen from time to time. And these are the probabilities now of at least 4. And you see in the darker reds a 95 to 100% probability for at least 4 in that stretch from northeast Ohio, northwest PA, southwest New York, south of Buffalo, and then in north central New York, north of Syracuse. Well, Syracuse is in that probability for at least 4, at least 50 to 60% probability for at least 4. Also in the western part of the lower peninsula of Michigan, as well as in the upper peninsula of Michigan, we've got some high probabilities for at least 4 there. And if we widen this out, you can see that all the action is around the Great Lakes and in the lake effect zones. Nothing in the next 72 hours forecast of size in the west. I'll even drop it down to 2 inches, and you can see there's just a few small areas there. And the probabilities we're talking about 5 to 10%. So it's nothing here to write home about at all. And all right, so I think at this point, what we could probably do is I think I'm going to go to the teleconnections and see what they have to tell us. They might have to tell us a few things. So let me see if I can find it. All right, so this is the PNA. This is the Pacific North America Index, and this one's been straddling the neutral line or slightly positive for the last couple of weeks. Kind of straddles the neutral line, and then toward the middle of the month of December, you see that things start to turn upward. So I don't know if that's the start of a longer term trend or not. We'll see. But for the time being, it's kind of on the flattish side, which really would sort of argue against any kind of major storm. The PNA, the Pacific North America Index, usually measures, trough in the east, ridge in the west when it's positive, and ridge in the east, trough in the west when it's negative. So right now it's kind of neutral, which sort of implies, a bit of a flattish flow. Depending on where you are, it might be Pacific air, it might be Canadian air, but it's on the flattish side. Let me see if I can get the Arctic oscillation up, because that's the one that really is kind of interesting right now. The AO, the Arctic oscillation, Joe, as of is crashing rapidly, and is 1, 2, 3, and that corresponds, by the way, with this cold shot that we're getting, almost 4 standard deviations negative on the AO, and it stays pretty much -2 or more, pretty much right through the next couple of weeks, and that when the AO is negative, when the Arctic oscillation is negative, that usually implies that there's cold air around, and depending on what the other teleconnections are doing, it could be in the east, it could be in the Midwest. In this particular instance, I think because the NAO is doing what it's doing, which is also being on the negative side, and we'll take a look at the NAO. Yep, now that's the page I was looking for. The NAO is at the same time crashing to almost 2 standard deviations negative. But, Joe, this is one of those situations with with this kind of flattish flow. the -2 on the North Atlantic Oscillation is telling you that a lot of the cold air is confined to the eastern part of the United States, and the troughs are not in positions to take advantage of that cold air. And also, being 2 standard deviations negative is a solid reason why I'm as cold as I am, because that displaces, the more negative the NAO is, the further south in the eastern part of the United States the cold air gets.
Well, the latest tweets from Dr. Cohen I've been finding interesting. He points out that he previously was thinking that the polar vortex, based upon model guidance, was showing a weakening of the polar vortex for the second week of December, and now the weather models are predicting a Canadian warming. It's stretched, followed by that Canadian warming, and he's trying to predict the next two states of the polar vortex, which he considers to be, now this is a quote from Dr. Cohen, the most critical of the entire winter. Now, we haven't got started into winter yet, but he's considering that this phase that we're about to go through might be the most critical of the entire winter season upcoming. That I found that rather interesting, and he points out that that there's a lot of hedging that he's going to be doing, trying to determine exactly what's going on. It almost sounds like he's picked up from last winter, where he made some predictions which didn't come true, or disgusting.
In all fairness, it has to be really frustrating when you're dealing with something as highly technical as the stratosphere is, and I mean a lot of that stuff is above our pay grade, but I mean in terms of trying to forecast it and the stratospheric warming events, which may or may not split the polar vortex, which may or may not have implications for the weather across the U.S. depending on one thing or another, but so I'm very much wanting to give him a pretty wide latitude, because this stuff is not easy, and I understand everybody wants somebody to give them the answer. Okay, what is the answer to all of this? What is going to happen? And the reality is that there's a lot of uncertainty, and none of us really know where this is all going to go.
Well, he calls it a challenging forecast, with the atmosphere teetering on a fence going one of two ways. And so much is in play here. And he just basically says it's going to be tough to figure out this winter. Somebody on his Twitter feed notes, he said, I do suggest, I sense some hedging of bets here, Dr. Cohen. It's not playing a straight game at the moment. To which Dr. Cohen replied simply in 2 words, always hedging. So,
oh yeah,
there you go.
The flood weather. Thank you for sending me the East Pacific oscillation charts, which I've always said that this is to me the most important of all the of all the teleconnections as far as cold is concerned. And actually, we are slightly negative. So when it's negative, that favors cold air. I think the NAO is probably having, and the Arctic Oscillation are probably having a bit more of an impact than the East Pacific Oscillation is. And it is forecast to go positive as we go into this weekend, which would probably, that means that this cold air mass does pull out. And then we see the EPO turning down again, going negative on the around the 5th or the 6th of December, and then kind of straddling the neutral line and then going negative by 1 standard deviation. This, by the way, is the GFS, and the European is negative now, goes positive, stays positive for a little longer, and then eventually just gradually goes slightly negative once we get past, say, I got to see what the date is there. It looks like around the 8th or the 9th that it starts to go negative. So negative EPO is usually colder for the for the eastern U.S. Or certainly the northeastern U.S. Let's say. But right now the NAO seems to be in control of all this. Joe, I've said this. You've heard me say this how many times, and I think I'm going to repeat it again. There's a lot of weird stuff that's going on. Um, in fact, one thing, and I'm going to bring it up now that no one's, I saw someone mention it today on Twitter. Ryan Mao, I think it was. But apparently, and then I looked at the European uh, vis-a-vis the GFS. Uh, they're in the ice box uh, in a big way. I mean, I'm going to put up the anomalies here, the 2 meter temperature anomalies, and this is right now, where much of the northern part of Europe at the moment, and also down into Greece and over into Turkey, very much below normal. France is above, Spain is above, Italy's but not by a lot, but they are above. But watch what happens when we go. I'm going to move this forward. Just watch what happens up in Norway and Sweden. There's a big push of cold air that sweeps through the British Isles and then sweeps all across Europe over the next 10 days. I mean, virtually all of Europe and the British Isles are, by the time we get to December 4th, or for this time of year, in a bit of an icebox with all this cold air. And it kind of hangs around going further into the long range. You start to get a little bit of moderation, in Spain and in France, but the northern part, northern Germany, Holland, England and Scotland, and then up in Norway and Sweden in particular, very cold air. And then, another push of cold air coming in toward the end of the forecast period. So if you want, there's cold in the northeastern part. There's cold in the eastern part of the United States right now. We've gotten a few of these shots. They tended to be transitory. They'll pull out, then they'll come back. That's probably going to continue. And in Europe, it looks like they're getting more sustained cold with the way the upper pattern is set up.
You mentioned about how things may begin to change a bit December 4th or 5th. The models, both the GFS and the European, now that we're talking about next Tuesday, Wednesday, that there could be a rather potent coastal system, a rather potent nor'easter that could be influencing our weather well, down here in the tri-state area, mostly heavy or possible heavy rain. And up north, that could mean translate into a significant snowfall. That's all happening again a week from now, around the 4th and 5th of December.
Yes, and by the way, November is going to finish below normal for the month, which I think would have surprised a lot of people. I think much of the East is probably going to finish the month below normal, considering the long range forecast, which is pretty much run the tape where everything is above normal, above normal, above normal, above normal. But here's our upper trough. That lifts out. And one of the issues as we get toward the end of the week is you'll notice that there's a trough in the west that comes into the Gulf of Alaska and pushes down into California. So that actually allows for a bit of ridging to pop up in the eastern part of the United States. Not a lot, but some. You also have a block over Greenland, but it's kind of it's not in the place where you would want it to be as far as driving some sort of big coastal storm / snow event for the coastal Northeast. It's just not in the right place. But the ridge that does eventually build into the eastern part of the United States next weekend is not going to last because the western trough gets into the east, and there's your trough for that what you mentioned, Joe, about Monday, Tuesday maybe of next week. Moving into the eastern part of the United States, it looks rather vigorous. Another trough drops down in the Gulf of Alaska between 160 and 140. So that starts to drive more troughs into the eastern part of the United States, one after another in the long range. So, I would think that at some point something's going to try to happen. But right now, it just seems like all we're doing is moving around chess pieces and trying to get them into position, much like Dr. Cohen says, it's sort of in a tenuous place.
Right. But at least we know one thing, or we can see one thing, and that is that the fire hose in the Pacific that we had last year at this time really doesn't exist.
No.
There are too many troughs that are dropping down through from the Aleutians into the Pacific that's kind of breaking that fire hose pattern up. And so it's simply not happening. So it's a different script this year, Joe, as opposed to a year ago.
By the way, speaking of different scripts, uh, no one, and I'm going to put this on the table right now. Every forecast has gone to that I've seen. Every forecast has gone to this idea that it's going to be colder and snowier. But what if it's just colder and drier, and you don't get many chances? I mean, I don't know that I'm just proposing this. Um, if you could get a cold weather pattern that sets up where the troughs are along or just off the East Coast, so you get these cold air masses that keep coming into the eastern part of the United States, but the trough axis is too far east for any kind of storm development. I mean, that is possible here.
Oh yeah, no question. That's what happened for the most part in 72, 73, when we ended up with only about 2.8 inches of snow at Central Park, and but in that year, the cold was really significant, but it also helped to push a lot of the storms to the south. There were some really massive snowfalls that occurred over the southeastern part of the United States that winter, as opposed to where you would normally expect them to be here in the Northeast.
Yep.
And that could very well happen again.
Does happen. All right, so really, we've got the upper trough that's coming through tomorrow. You can see the lake effect bands, and there'll be some local. I think there's going to be some scattered local snow showers around tomorrow afternoon. The core of the cold air starts to move out. Actually, it tries to move out on Wednesday. Just a brief reinforcement, but Thursday we'll definitely see temperatures start bouncing up as winds go more southwest, and you see moisture gathering in Texas. Moisture coming into the west coast. There's a low that comes out of Oklahoma and heads away into Kentucky. There's not much of one. It's just like an area of rain, really. Low jumps out. Suddenly there's a low over Cape Cod that runs out northeast. It dries out on Saturday. Bit of a high builds to the north with a bit of an onshore flow. Then you got another wave that comes up for Sunday night into Monday morning. You see it there, and then this particular model run makes a stronger storm in eastern Canada on Tuesday, and we get a shot of colder air back in again. There's a diver that comes down into Virginia and into the southern Appalachians. It's got snow over me for a brief time, if that's right. But then that goes out, and then here comes another front with another shot of cold air, and that goes out, and then another front with more cold air, and then something coming out of the Gulf in about 2 weeks' time. Which, of course, we all know that if we ran this one more time, we go to the next run, there's a lot of things that will look different than what's being indicated. But for the time being, it's sort of a wash, rinse, repeat pattern here. We've been getting shots of cold air. I would view that as encouraging for those of you who want winter weather for the longer term. It's not a bad thing to see this now. And the fact that we're not seeing any threats of snow is probably also not a bad thing, because this time of year you got to have an almost perfect setup, and you're just not going to get it. When you get deep into December and January and February, when those types of things are more likely, okay. But right now, the number of times it snowed heavily through the first week of December, you can count on two hands at most over the last 100 years.
Well, so far on weather trends, we have the season-to-date snowfall across the U.S. is trending 46% less than last year and 35% below average, and the ninth least of the past 38 years. The heaviest snow so far, this goes from the 30th of September to the current day. The heaviest snow so far has been in the Rocky Mountains, the Upper Plains, and in Maine. That's where, here in the Northeast, you want to see the snow. That's where it's been for the most part. Of course, tonight with the lake effect, that will change a bit. But overall, Joe, so far, about 46% less than last year in terms of season-to-date snowfall compared to 2022.
Well, having an early start for snowfall is no guarantee of anything. You know, we've had years where everybody looks at the snow cover in Canada in November exploding and thinks I forgot what year it was. Maybe it was about 3 or 4 years ago, uh, where the snow cover in Canada went off the wall in the month of November, and everybody was, people were all excited about that, and it turned out to be, you know, not not a good winter. I think that was the winter that we had no El Nino, no La Nina. It was La Nada or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we'll see. We'll see. All right, let's do some Briller Jeopardy here. And we're still on this theme of the lowest temperature ever in each state. And tonight's first state is South Dakota, Joe. South Dakota.
Oh, well, right off the bat, why don't I just throw my 2 cents in and say minus minus 60.
Minus 60. That's a good guess. That's a very good guess. You're not too far off. I won't say in which direction.
Okay.
But let's see what the folks on the chat board have to say about this. South Dakota, minus 55 for David Fuller, minus 54 for Fledweather, minus 53 for Christinapedia, minus 56 for Chuck Cardillo, and Adam Lowe gets it at minus 58. Minus 58. Can you guess where, Joe?
In South Dakota?
Yes.
Well, it's not at the Raccoon National Cemetery because that's in Dakota.
Right. I'll give you a hint. You've probably you've probably eaten this apple.
It's an apple.
Yes.
A
fairly common.
Golden Delicious. Golden Delicious South
right.
Dakota.
It's Golden Delicious, right, or Red Delicious South Dakota. No, it's not. It's not that. Nor is it Honeycrisp, South Dakota. Nor is it Fiji, South Dakota. Nor is it Gala, South Dakota. But Rich Rothmansky got it. McIntosh,
South Dakota. Wow.
All right. The state next to me, Essenet, better known as Tennessee.
And that, by the way, is where our rescue dog came from Tennessee. So I don't know what they did to him.
What, from Bent Fork?
I don't think it was from Bent Fork. Well, I don't know. How about for Tennessee? I'll say minus 28.
Minus 28. I'll tell you what. I would say it's a good guess, but not cold enough. But it's a good guess. Rich Rothmansky says 30. Frank Scalera says minus 33. Helen Bertona, you're too cold at minus 39. Matthew Howe gets it, and so did Maggie P. Minus 32. Minus 32 for Tennessee, in Mountain City, Tennessee, Joe. Mountain City.
Okay.
Seminole, Texas holds the record for the lowest temperature in the Lone Star State.
Well, I'll tell you, you get a good old-fashioned blue norther, and you can see temperatures plummet very, very quickly. I know that there was a case in one Texas town where they had 93 degrees, and the next day it was 11 above and blizzard-like conditions. I think it was in Lubbock, too. Coldest temperature in Texas, I'm going to say minus 45.
That's way too cold, Joe. Actually, Christinapedia hit it almost right off the bat there. Minus 23 in Seminole, Texas. I would have thought it might have been a little lower considering, Amarillo's pretty far north, but minus 23. Yeah. Utah, Peter Sinks, Utah, Joe, which we've spoken about many times here on the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast. Peter Sinks, Utah.
Well, yesterday morning, according to the chairman, they got down to minus 41. So what could possibly Peter Sinks have gotten in late January or early February? I'm going to say I'll say minus 65.
That's a good guess. You're doing a lot of good guesses. Izzy D has a better guess at minus 68.
Wow.
And Matthew Howe has also a better guess at minus 70. So,
Jeez.
and same with Rich Rothmansky. So if you split the difference, Joe, what do we get?
What do we got? Minus 69?
Minus 69. Peter Sinks, Utah, minus 69.
Wow.
And the last one is Vermont. Vermont. And it was in Bloomfield, Vermont. Upper Bloomfield.
Okay.
As opposed to Lower Bloomfield. Bloomfield, Vermont.
That anywhere near Burlington or?
I don't know. My guess is it's probably maybe closer to Montpelier than it is to Burlington.
All right. Well, I'll say minus Vermont. How about minus 55?
That's a fair guess. A little too low, but it's a fair guess. Vermont from Christina Peters is minus 53. That's closer. Virginia Ginger at minus 53. That's closer. Helen Bertona at minus 52 is even closer than that. Chris Alley also minus 52. Getting closer there. Okay, Michael Azera has minus 59. John Melander minus 56. All right, so Frank Scalera is at minus 51. Matthew Howe is at minus 49. What do you think it is, Joe?
Well, minus. What did I say? I said minus.
Well, I just pointed out that Matthew Howe is at minus 51 and Frank Scalera is at Matthew Howe's at minus 49 and Frank Scalera is at minus 51.
Well, Rich Rothmansky is minus 50.
Well, then that's it. Half a dollar. Now, David
right.
Fuller actually also in flood weather earlier. I missed that. They both had minus 50. So, yes, minus 50. Maggie P. Flood weather. Gotcha. Everybody got it. Minus 50 for Bloomfield, Vermont. So, anyway, I've got nothing to rant about on this Monday night.
No, and in fact, if we sign off right now,
you can catch the rest of Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer.
The second half.
Yeah, our audience numbers are slightly lower tonight because I'm sure everybody's just flocked to CBS to see Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer and Clarice, who was just she was the cause of all the difficulties here. No doe of mine is going to be seen with a red-nosed reindeer. Remember that?
I often wondered. Donner was Rudolph's father.
Right.
Comet was the one who coached the reindeer, the young reindeer. I often wondered, they'd say, "And gang, we're not going to let Rudolph play in any reindeer games." I'm saying to myself, really, that's how you treated Donner's kid. And were the two of you next to each other when you're pulling Santa's sleigh? And how do you feel about that, Donna?
Yeah, there's a lot of, you have to take, I guess, a lot of poetic license in order to accept a few things.
Yes. And by the way, Yukon Cornelius, if any of you have not noticed, look for it tonight. On his dog sled, he has a French poodle.
Yeah.
Mush! Mush!
Exactly. All right, the Joe and Joe Weather Show tonight, as it is every night, is brought to you by our affiliate Tempest by WeatherFlow. Get the revolutionary Tempest weather system, and you too can join the fastest growing observing weather network on the planet. Great gift for kids into science with the holidays on our doorstep. You can order it now and have it at your house in a few days. The link is pinned at the top of the chat board. It's also on the descriptor of this video. Use the coupon code IWANTAWeatherStation, and if you do, you'll get
10% off. It's the funniest part about Rudolph is at the very beginning when they show all of those cities that are getting snow and blitzed by cold weather. And I always love looking at the Daily News front page.
Right.
about Christmas being and I look up in the upper right-hand corner.
What was the price on it?
7 cents.
7 cents?
7 cents. And today, if you buy a daily news, it's $3.
But that had to be the Sunday daily that was 7 cents.
No, it was the regular.
It was the regular daily was 7 cents, because I remember it being under 10 cents as a kid.
The Sunday daily news at one time was 25 cents.
I remember that. I delivered the daily news, and the New York Post.
And they also had a TV guide, and they had a Colorado magazine, their own magazine section, which they don't have anymore. It's
Those days are gone, Joe.
Yep.
They're long gone. The papers are smaller. If you even get a newspaper. I haven't bought a newspaper in years. Decades.
Okay.
All
so
right.
Cardillo, what was Rudolph's mother's name? They do actually mention in the show that it's Mrs. Donner. Mrs. Donner. That was Rudolph's mother's name because she was married to Donner.
Right.
So.
All right. On that lovely note, we will see everybody tomorrow at 7:35. Have a great night.
And thank you to Ken Musillo for hitting Super Chat tonight.
99, everybody.